It's Wednesday,
Recording in
August 16th.
progress.
This is the meeting's in progress. And this is the meeting of the LTD Board of Directors. Welcome, everyone. I'll start with a roll call. Susan Cox. Pete Knox. Here. Kelly Sutherland. Here. Lawrence Green. Here. Michelle Weber. Here. And Heather Murphy. Here. I'd like to welcome everybody back. And I know some of you had various meetings and attended various events during the break. Thank you for doing that. But welcome back, everyone. Comments from the general manager.
Sure. Thank you. Just a few comments. Want to kind of echo what Gino was saying. We had our bus rodeo here a few weeks ago, and want to thank Michelle and Susan and Kelly Sutherland for coming by, but also Greg Fitzgerald was our photographer. Susan's husband did a good job taking photos for us, and it was a good day for that because we also had Councilperson Doyle from Springfield. And also Senator Merkley came and visited us. We had a follow-up visit relating to our electric buses. So that was good. And we're also joined by Bruce Weber as well. So that was good. We also had our company barbecue as well. It was the first time we were able to get together as a group. Again, Michelle and spouse and Heather Murphy was able to join us over there, along with Mayor Van Gordon. Joined us with his twin girls. It was fun. We had a lot of employees and their families there, so it was good to see that and see people having a good time. I want to thank the events committee for all the hard work in putting that together. So that was good. And then finally, we had the ATU rather closely related had the ATU picnic, which covers all of the union members across the state and in Washington as well. And Camille was able to attend and represent the executive team. So that was a good event as well. So we want to thank the union for that invite. As you know, coming in last few days, the weather, the air quality has been awry. So we've been coordinating with Lane County on the fires that are happening. Cosette's been our point of contact. She's been disseminating that information throughout the organization. We did make a decision yesterday to keep Eugene Station open until 10 o'clock last night to provide a space for people to get out of some of the smoke. And we did offer free rides to cooling and centers for folks to get out of the smoke. You may have seen it on the news. In the past weeks, we've had several visits through neighboring communities. We kind of keyed in on Cottage Grove. So I want to thank Heather Murphy for that. We were able to meet with the city manager, the assistant city manager, several of the council people, and go down for a community event down there as well, sponsored by the Chamber and the Symphony. So making good strides that way, a wonderful community, and we certainly want to see how LTD can continue to provide services there. We also took a staff trip down there. So staff got on the bus and took a trip down there as well. Long-range financial planning, we are in the process of working on that. We had a presentation at the Finance Committee, went over some of the assumptions there. That will be coming back to the budget committee this fall as agreed. Some things have changed. Economics have changed. The contract has caused some changes. So we'll be updating that. And we'll hear more of that at the retreat that we're going to be planning for November. So the long-range financial plan and how we move forward as an organization, we know that our enabling legislation is 50 years old, so we're assessing that. What are the gray areas? What are the no-go areas? What are the full-go areas? And how do we serve our communities and answer the question of what our communities need us to be? And you'll hear more about that as well. So with that, I'll conclude that update. And if you have any questions, happy to answer.
Any questions of Jameson? Thank you, Jameson. Any announcements or additions to the agenda? Seeing none. Audience participation. I don't see any people signed up. Do we have anybody online? Nope. Okay. Let's move into the first item, the employee engagement survey results. Michelle Peterson is presenting.
I'm so sorry. We do actually have audience participation.
Great.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can, if you could identify yourself and just a reminder.
Yes, I'm Rob Zake. I'm Executive Director of Better Eugene Springfield Transportation. I'm kind of a wallflower, and you can't believe what it does to my self-esteem when I'm here wanting to speak to you, and I'm told that I'm not even here, but it all worked out, so it's okay. We're working with the technology. We don't really lobby you so much anymore. We just come and sort of share information. So I've got 3 quick updates that might be of interest to you. First, our Better Streets for People and Businesses campaign, which is funded with a APTA local coalition grant. Thank you to LTD for supporting us in that. Believe it or not, that grant's coming to an end in a couple weeks. We've done a lot of outreach along Franklin Boulevard, including 2 walking tours. Mayor Lucy Venus joined us a couple weeks ago, as did Lane County Public Health Director Jocelyn Warren. We got a good story in the Eugene Weekly and on KZI TV. We've had almost 600 people respond to our poll with tons of comments, which we're going to go through and share back. But the top line is this: of the people who participated, 3/4 rate Franklin Boulevard today as fair, poor, or worst. What we're definitely hearing is that it needs changes. What those changes might be is another conversation, but there's community support for making improvements or changes to that. So we'll share back on that. Second, and I don't want to steal thunder from Heather, but really excited about the Lane Act member priority needs assessment, and LTD is submitting a need that's consistent with the work that you're doing about turning into a mobility management agency. So looking forward to that discussion coming up. And lastly, somewhat to my surprise, Best inquired whether we might join the Oregon Transit Association as a member. And next thing I knew, I'm on the board of directors of the Oregon Transit Association, and I'm scheduled to go to Bend next month for a retreat. So I'm looking forward to learning what it is that we've signed up for, and hopefully get to meet with Jameson, who can help me know what's going on there. So that's the news I have to share. Thank you.
Thank you for your updates, Rob, and your work in the community. Do we have anybody else?
No.
No. Okay, now we can go on to the employee engagement survey results. Michelle. And for the board's information, in case you didn't pick up on it, there's a, I believe, a new presentation that was available online.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen of the board. I'm Michelle Peterson, the Interim Director of Human Resources and Risk Management. I'm pleased to present to you the results of our employee engagement survey, which was conducted in May of this year. Slide, please. The survey consisted of 65 questions. 62 were benchmark rated on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being strongly disagree with the statement, and 5 being strongly agree with the statement. Anything from 1 to 2.84 is considered less engaged. 2.85 to 4.4 is engaged, and 4.5 to 5 is highly engaged. 3 were open-ended questions. What do you like most and least about working at the district? Excuse me. And what improvement would you recommend to make the district a better place to work? Overall, we exceeded our participation goal with a 73% response rate, which was up from 58% from last year, which is a vast improvement. This equates to 237 out of 323 employees participating. The questions were designed to measure both satisfaction and engagement levels, with comparisons made between management, non-management, union and admin, and all the different departments. Slide, please. The overall score increased by 0.23, which is significant, as Cascade considers any increase of 0.1 or higher to be a distinct improvement for an organization. As you can see, transit operations has the most improved score, increasing by 0.47, as well as improving engagement from 8% to 16%. Union employees' engagement increased from 5 to 14%. Slide, please. Benefits is our highest rated metric, coming in at 4.55, which indicates a high level of engagement. It is also encouraging that the statements, "I'm interested in the future of our organization," and "I understand how my job relates to the organizational success," are also highly rated. One of the most telling points of the survey is how many times employees praised their coworkers and stated that they work with people they truly like. Slide, please. This slide represents the overall category score, where you can see improvement in all areas since 2022. We are extremely pleased with the survey results and look forward to continuing to move in the right direction. Slide, please. We had a district-wide pizza lunch last Thursday as a thank you for participation to all employees. Going forward, we have reviewed the data with the survey results team, identified focus areas for prioritization, and we are moving forward to implement our action plans. Thank you. Any questions?
Questions or comments?
Yeah, this is a very positive result, so we're very pleased.
Do you have any next steps internally and what you'll be doing with these results?
Yes. So we have what we call our survey results team. In fact, we've already met and we have identified 3 to 5 areas of prioritization. And those include communication and safety, collaboration, and policy consistency. Those are kind of the comments that we saw over and over again in the open-ended question part of the survey. And so we are dedicated to really prioritizing and then creating some sort of task force so we can move forward to implement those.
And task force membership is made up of?
So we have from each, it's an executive team, some members of the executive team, Jameson, members of the ATU. So we're trying to get each individual department as much as we can to be represented.
Michelle?
So it's really nice to see some of these numbers going up as far as participation. Is that because we offered some flexibility and some opportunities that weren't there before for those folks to, come in and use computers or whatever, offering them, some additional time to get that accomplished and kind of next steps to continue increasing participation in those lower areas? Do you have some thoughts on what that looks like?
We've got, excuse me, we've got computers in the operators lounge, as you may know. And we actually had several members of the operations team who went in every single day and encouraged people who were in the lounge or at the watering hole or what have you to participate. And in all honesty, that was huge. I can't say enough about their encouragement, and going forward, we'll continue that. I think our HR team getting out and really promoting it as well and assisting with that, I think is something that's pretty important as well.
Great, thank you.
Kelly?
Do you have a budget or funding to implement the focus areas of prioritization when you come up with how you want to prioritize and implement?
I'll defer to you.
Yeah, it's built into our normal activities. What's interesting about this survey was it's generally the same things we've seen in the past. Some of the things that we're working on now out of this were already in the pipeline. Internal communications, we had already had a bit of a plan done last year, earlier this year rather, that we are modifying based on some of the comments and feedback that we hear here. So we're going down the road on that. We got some feedback around safety initiatives, and I think the team met today, and a lot of the things that came up we're already in the process of doing. So it's more about making sure people know that these things are happening. Case in point, the ambassador program that's up and running now, and fare checks along MX. We think that there are ways to do them a little bit better. We have what we call a blue card process with our operators when they report things on these blue cards, and making sure that the loop is closed at the end of those, so they know that things have been handled. So a lot of that kind of stuff. I do think that there will be some things that come down the line that will have to be worked into future budgets. If we're talking about different communication strategies that are beyond email and beyond written notes, I think we'll be looking at that because most of our workforce is mobile and not in the office. Yeah.
Thank you.
And I assume this is an annual survey, so next May or June would be another survey.
Typically, it's conducted every other year.
Okay.
Just because of the, people get tired of the surveys
Sure.
and so you like to have a little bit of that extra time to take a look and implement these prioritizations, so.
Perfect. Any other questions or comments? Congratulations, and looks like you have some work ahead of you. But
Yes,
good work.
we do. Thank you.
Sure, Jameson.
So I think, Mr. President, you asked about next steps and the response rate. Michelle, you asked about that. I think it's important to acknowledge that the team here, both the executive team, the union, and our employee council have all committed to not letting this sit on a shelf. We want to make sure that there are actionable items out of this. As Michelle mentioned, we met today already, and we think we have a good finger on it. We will communicate to the organization the cadence for when we'll check back. We're going to build work plans around each of these items. That's why the budget question is a little loosey-goosey, but we're going to build work plans around each of those and then report back. The worst thing that we can do is collect this information and then just sit on it. And that's happened. That's happened. We all acknowledge that. So I think that was a big part in getting the response rate. The union did a really good job in encouraging people, and now it's up to us to deliver so that we continue to have that response rate as we move forward.
Thank you. Next item is the general manager evaluation process. We have Mark from SDAO. Give us a presentation. Welcome back.
Very much. Good afternoon, Chair Grimaldi and members of the board. Again, I am Mark Knutson. I'm a senior consultant with the Special Districts Association of Oregon. I had the pleasure of addressing you earlier this year, and we talked. One of the things we talked about in that conversation was the importance of accountability. And obviously, folks took it to heart, and I truly appreciate that. And so I've been asked to come back and help facilitate a process for the evaluation of your CEO. And so having done this many times, of course, I have some thoughts in terms of how you might approach it. But at the end of the day, it's your evaluation process. And so what I want to do this evening is basically provide an overview of what we would suggest, get your feedback, input, ideas, reactions. If we need to refine it, we can certainly do so. If you think it's great, then we can talk about exactly how we proceed with next steps. So with that, you should have in your packets the handouts, and so I'll be covering that material. What I'll be doing this evening is first spend just a couple of minutes talking about objectives for an evaluation process. I'm really big in beginning with the end in mind. Then I will present the proposed process and schedule for completing the evaluation this year. Some of the key components and issues that you really need to decide upon. Then I'll propose some next steps. And I also, based on my observations, I want to offer a couple of few suggestions for refinements as you go forward. So in terms of objectives, again, we talked a lot about this last time, but the accountability of the CEO's performance is key. You've hired him, you made a tremendous commitment to move forward with him in that position. I've reviewed his job description, and nowhere in that job description did I see the criteria of mind reader. And so the idea here is that you provide some input in terms of how he's doing, and most importantly, how he can do even better in the next review period. And so that's really what we're trying to get at through this process. It also allows you to provide accountability to the public in terms of your constituents and demonstrating that you're aware of the important issues in terms of the CEO's performance. It also, of course, is a best practice. We think it's key. One of the biggest challenges we have is that organizations like yourselves don't go through this process. And so we think it's really an important step. It also, as I reviewed Jameson's employment agreement, it's a condition of employment. It's part of the agreement that you entered into, and so we want to satisfy that criteria. And there are some compensation decisions that you will need to make as a result of this process. So what I've structured for you is intended to address all of those points. One of the key things, and I think I mentioned this last time, of course, An evaluation historically is viewed as looking back over the last year, how did the employee do during that evaluation period? I would suggest that's part of the process, but equally important is to set goals and be clear in terms of the expectations for the next evaluation period. And so I've structured this process to be able to get at that. Yeah, in the bottom with the two little circles, you folks already get this, but again, you'd be surprised there are a lot of organizations in the state that don't. On the left, it really begins with the organization's strategic business plan. The organization does an assessment, the red box on the left. Based on that, you identify some goals and priorities. Everybody has an opportunity to move forward and implement that, the purple box on the bottom, and you track and report your progress, and you just continue to update that over time to make sure that the organization is moving forward. I would suggest that it is an integral element of that process that there's a tremendous amount of overlap because the CEO is your implementer that allows you to be able to achieve the goals and objectives that you identify for that strategic planning process. You get that, it is embedded in the CEO's employment agreement. And so I'm not going to belabor that, but there's always needs to be overlap in terms of the goals and objectives of the CEO and the goals and objectives of the organization. So as I worked through this process and talked with Jameson and Camille to understand what you need and how we can move forward, I've identified 6 steps that you could use. And again, this is a proposal to you. And it really starts tonight with your consideration of the process and the criteria. And I'll spend a fair amount of time talking about criteria. Assuming we can reach agreement in terms of the process and criteria, then hopefully next month you'll be in a position to be able to approve that process and criteria, the form that you want to use. At which point then step 3 is Jameson has an opportunity to complete his own evaluation, a self-evaluation that then a few weeks later is shared with you that provides input to you in terms of how you complete your evaluation. After you receive Jameson's self-evaluation, then each board member will independently, stress that independently, complete your own evaluation using the form that you agree to, and then provide your input back to me. I will compile all the input and prepare an anonymous summary that basically reflects all of the input that I've received and also scores that I've received in terms of the evaluation criteria scoring process that we're going to use. I'll compile that summary and then come back in November is how it kind of charts out in terms of time. Share that with you in an executive session because you've satisfied all the criteria that would allow you to conduct an executive session for the purpose of evaluating the performance of the CEO. And then you can look at the evaluation summary that I've prepared based on everybody's input. Hopefully the board thinks that's an accurate reflection in terms of the input that you want to provide to Jameson. We will then bring Jameson in, or at Jameson's discretion, that meeting can be held in open session, and at some point Jameson will need to make that decision. But whether it's an executive session or open session, the board will then share the compiled summary from everybody's input, and that will be the feedback that Jameson receives for that evaluation period. And if there are any goals that were identified for the next evaluation period, that's when those will be shared as well. At that point, my work is basically complete, but I want to encourage you to consider that you still have to complete a review of compensation. And that's an important part of this process. But what hopefully I've given you is the data, if you will, to be able to provide that judgment in terms of what is the appropriate adjustments that you want to make. So I'm not going to offer recommendations to you on compensation, but I will give you basically your data. So there are key elements of this process that have to, I should have mentioned, in your packet is a memo from me, looks like this. It basically includes everything that I've just described in terms of the process. For those of you that like it in words, it's here. If you like it, the graphic, it's in the presentation. Either way, I want to make sure you understand the sequence, the steps, and the schedule so that everybody has an opportunity to provide input. It all comes together in November, and that's when you will share the information with Jameson. In terms of components to be able to complete this process, there's 4 things that we really need to be complete in terms of how we approach this. A defined evaluation period. When are we going to make the assessment? Over what period of time? What performance criteria are we all going to use to be able to complete the evaluation? What is the rating scale? You know, do we go A, B, C, D, E? Do we go, you know, good, better, best? I mean, let's be clear and let's all use the same scale. And then last but not least, is there a form that we can use so that everybody's looking at it the exact same way and provides the input using the same structured process? So 4 things. There are several important pieces of input that I have pulled together, again, based on information I've received from staff that I think is relevant. In terms of the evaluation period, first of all, the effective date of Jameson's employment agreement was shown as November 7th, 2022. So effectively in November, Jameson has had a year to complete that first year of employment. Now, there's a couple other important pieces in there. It acknowledges that the employee's base salary will be subject to review and adjustment based on the evaluation, that during the first year, evaluations will be done every 4 months. I haven't been involved and I'm not going to weigh on that, but the fact of the matter is it is in the employment agreement that way. And last but not least, upon completion of each annual performance evaluation, the board shall determine the amount of employees' performance bonus based on performance during the preceding bonus year. So again, there is a compensation element that the board will have to determine once you complete the evaluation. Based on the date, the effective date of the employment agreement, I would recommend that the 2023 evaluation period be November 7th, 2022 through October 31st, 2023. Pretty much a year. Rounds it off to a month. The other value is most of that is behind us, but it also is, you know, the next couple of months, right? And so you can be gathering information as it goes along as well. I want to suggest at this point that, and you don't need to do it now, but it may make sense, and I mean that in terms of may. I'd encourage you to consider adjusting that schedule. Having an annual review process that begins and ends on November 1st is, you know, it's a little odd. I mean, maybe it works for you, in which case that's awesome. What I find is a lot of organizations like to do it in the spring. And the reason they do it in the spring is because then it folds in nicely with the budget planning process and the fiscal year process. I can't make that decision for you, but I want to encourage you to at least think about adjusting the schedule for the next evaluation period. And again, I mean, I think staff would want to weigh in on this as well, but you should be clear as you set goals for the next evaluation period. What is the evaluation period going to be? When are we going to do this again? I will also tell you that in working with your staff, I will give you the Word documents and the PowerPoint presentation, all of the original documents that you need so that you can do this on your own with staff's help next year if you choose to do so. My goal is to teach you to fish rather than continuing to ask me to fish for you, if that makes sense. So that's my first recommendation, evaluation period of 11/7/22 through 10/31/23. Next is the evaluation criteria. So again, I think I shared with you last time, I'm an engineer. I like to have very clear metrics in terms of what we're working against so that I can know if we're making progress or not. As I reviewed the CEO's existing employment agreement, there were several elements that are relevant to this concept of evaluation criteria. Again, that will evaluate performance during the year, that there is a basis for the compensation review, and the evaluation shall be measured in terms of pursuit and achievement of the duties and bonus goals identified in the employment agreement. So what I did on the bottom slide there that you certainly can't read, in the employment agreement, there are about 16 bullet points in terms of job duties. And they are, first of all, it's an excellent employment agreement. I was really very impressed. And to have this level of detail is very unique. And so it becomes basically input to me in terms of allowing me to glean the information from the employment agreement, the expectations that you had in terms of duties, and craft that as evaluation criteria. And so I've taken those 16 bullet points from the evaluation or from the employment agreement and built them into evaluation criteria that I will share with you in a minute. Similarly, you have a position description, a job description for the CEO position. Same kind of thing. Within the job description, there are interesting coincidence about 16 bullet points. Some are similar, some are different. Collectively, they make a lot of sense in terms of defining the expectations for the position. And then last but not least, you have this just awesome strategic business plan. Again, there are very few organizations that have a strategic business plan as well developed and refined as you have. And so congratulations on that. And you have essentially a real-time reporting process in terms of reporting on those metrics that are presented on your website. And so those become the basis for the compensation adjustment should you decide that that's appropriate. And again, that's directly out of the employment agreement. So you have all of these evaluation criteria essentially built into your employment agreement, job description, and how you've been tracking performance related to the strategic business plan. So you've made my job a dream. Thank you very much. Based on that, and again, I mean, you've made Jameson's accountability extremely high as a result of this. So what I have included in your board packet is a document that looks like this. There are what I've identified as 5 success factors. Basically, I've taken all of the bullet points from the employment agreement and the job description and grouped them into 5 categories. Provides effective administration of the district and transit system. Basically, keeping the lights on for this organization and doing your core business. Providing effective support of the board of directors. The CEO is the key link with the staff, and he is really the support person that you look to. And so I think that's probably a key role that we want to evaluate his performance on. Provides effective leadership and management of district staff. He is the leader of the organization in terms of the staff looking to him. And so we want to evaluate performance in terms of management. We want to look at oversight and management of district financial resources. Again, it all goes through him. Now you've got a CFO and that's great, but the fact of the matter is he's the individual that you would hold accountable for performance related to finances. And then last but not least, you've got several different activities that relate to representing the district at local, regional, and national levels. Governmental policy, intergovernmental affairs would fall into those categories as well. And so I put some of the bullets into those. So this document basically takes all of the 30-some bullets out of the employment agreement and the job description and groups them by those 5 categories. I didn't make up anything because you already had it all there. So I'm suggesting that those 5 categories are really your evaluation criteria that you would use going forward. In addition, there are what I would suggest are 2 goal-driven evaluation criteria. The first is achieving the organizational goals identified in the strategic business plan, specifically identified in the employment agreement, and a key cornerstone in terms of getting you down the road and achieving your goals for the organization. And so I think that's key. And again, it's also a basis for evaluating compensation. In addition, I want to suggest that there's a second goal area that you should consider, and that is progress in achieving individual performance goals. Now, in 2023, in completing that evaluation, you probably didn't have any. And so it's going to be silent in this particular case for this evaluation. And I think that's fine. But again, what I wanted to give you is a process that will stand the test of time and that you can use in the future. And again, I would suggest that as you go through this process, you should identify some personal goals for your CEO for the next evaluation period, and those would go into this criteria for the next evaluation period. So nothing to evaluate in personal goals for 2023, but let's leave it in there for future evaluations. And maybe you have some evaluations for 2023. I just some goals, but the real, to me, the critical one is progress in terms of the strategic business plan goals. So those are the 7 evaluation criteria that I would propose that you use. I'll keep going and then we'll just open it up. The next factor to be considered, the component to be defined, is what rating scale do you want to use? And different organizations do it a lot of different ways. I had one organization that had a school teacher on the board, and she was just adamant it had to be A through F. My personal bias is to use exceeds expectations, meets expectations, improvement needed, kind of kinder, gentler words, but it conveys the same thing. And typically there's about 5 criteria. Now, it turns out that Lane Transit District, for all of its other employees, has a 4-factor evaluation criteria that includes underperforming, developing performance, successful performance, and exceptional performance. Those are the grades that are used for all of the other positions in the organization, as I understand it. And so, in spite of the fact that I have a bias to use different factors, I'm going to recommend that you use the same factors that you use for everybody else in the organization. That makes a lot more sense to me, and so I'm very comfortable using that scale. And again, I mean, it all makes sense, right? Underperforming, that's pretty straightforward. Developing, yeah, we're getting there, but we've got some room to grow. Successful performance, doing the job at a very acceptable level. In some cases, glimmers of hope and encouragement and excitement. Or exceptional performance is just off the charts and everything is wonderful. So that's how I would interpret it. You can use your own interpretation, but I think it's key to use the same criteria as the rest of the organization. And then last but not least is, well, how do we write all this down? How do we capture this? Again, if I had my druthers, I would give you a form that I can very easily manage, manipulate, reduce all of the data, and that would be fine. And that's what we've done in other situations. But being the progressive organization that you are, it turns out you already have a really well-developed form that you use for all the other employees. And so to me, it makes more sense to use an adaptation of the form you use for all of the employees, but integrate the specific evaluation criteria that we've identified or that you ultimately agree upon in terms of assessing performance. And so in the packet is a proposed document. It looks like this. And basically, it identifies the position, the chief executive officer, identifies the rating scale that you're going to use, and then it has the success factors that I identified, the effective administration, effective support of the board, effective leadership and management of staff, oversight and management of finances, represents the district at local and regional levels, and goals in terms of identifying the strategic business plan goals and achieving individual performance goals. For each one of those criteria, there is the scale in terms of underperforming to exceptional performance, and there is a spot for where you can write comments. And those comments are really useful. So again, it looks very similar to what's used for all the other employees, just slightly adapted to use the CEO performance criteria. So with that, those are my suggestions in terms of the elements that you would need to successfully move forward with the evaluation. Again, what I'll do now is basically open it up, assuming that we can reach agreement in terms of the tools that we use. Then I would hope that you would consider approving them at your next board meeting. And if everybody agrees, I assume you could make it a consent agenda item. If you want to talk about it more next month, I'll be happy to come down and we can talk more about it at that time, whatever works for you. And then we will move forward with implementing it in terms of everybody, Jameson completing his evaluation, and then everybody completing their evaluation, and then we'll provide that collective feedback to Jameson. And with that, a couple of suggested refinements. The board and CEU should review the compensation after you've completed it. I'm not going to do that for you. You need to do that. And so if you want me to help, I can, but the fact of the matter is it's ultimately your decision based on the obligation you built into the employment agreement. I want you to consider revising the evaluation schedule for the next evaluation period. The reason I bring it up now is because you need to tell Jameson where the goalposts are for that next evaluation period. You've got to be clear in terms of these are the criteria that we're going to use, and here's the period over which you have to be able to complete our objectives. And then, like I said, I'll give you all the tools to be able to complete the process yourself in the future if you want. If you want us back, I'm happy to come back, but I would love to be able to see you doing this yourself. There's no reason you can't do this yourself. So with that, I'll shut up and now field any questions, comments, concerns you have on the tools and process that I've laid out for you.
Thank you, Mark. Any general questions and comments? Heather?
Thank you very much. This is very thorough, and I'm a huge supporter. I think we need to regularly and efficiently evaluate our executive. I think many of the timelines and the suggestions sound great, but I would like to hear from Jameson about his thoughts about the form. It makes sense for it to be in line with other employees, but I would love to hear your thoughts.
No, I agree. I think that, you know, I'm a cog in the wheel here, like everybody else. And I think the evaluation format and form should mirror as much as possible. I think the criteria will be different, you know, set by the board. But I think the big piece I think is beneficial for the organization now and going into the future is to have a process and have that process in place where that exists long after each of us. And I'm sure may have modifications along that way, but just have that process in place. But I'm in favor of that.
Thank you.
Pete?
Thanks. Thanks, Bart. This is, I think this is really logically laid out what you've done. And I appreciate that. I prefer that everybody Jameson and board, everybody needs to have some very clear objectives as far as how we evaluate somebody. Just a question, is this, you included in the packet here, this is a sample form based on our internal evaluation form, is that correct?
So the form that, the form that I've included in your packet is actually my proposal for the form that you would use for Jameson. The form that is used for other employees that I've seen is actually simplified from this because it has fewer criteria. I've introduced all 7 criteria that I believe are directly out of the employment agreement and the job description. You've used a slightly different approach for all of the other employees, but it's really structured in a very similar kind of way using a very similar appearing form.
Okay, so, all right, that makes sense. Because if you make sure I understand this correctly, you've taken those 16 plus bullet points and you've narrowed them down to 7 broad-based categories. That am I correct on that?
Yeah, yeah. So there were a total of about 30 bullet points. I've reduced those to 5 of the criteria that I've called success factors. There is this 1 goal related to the strategic business plan and 1 goal for personal performance goals that you should choose to establish for the future evaluation period. That is probably the only thing that wasn't in any of the documents that I reviewed is goals for the next evaluation period. And so I'm suggesting that it would be reasonable that you might have goals and areas that you want Jameson to focus on in the next evaluation period. That was my add to otherwise very complete information.
All right, thank you.
Michelle?
In reference to our commitment to quarterly assessments, would you suggest we use this form too, or would there be maybe like more of a simplified version?
I think you could simplify it dramatically. And again, I mean, the board needs to decide if you want to even pursue that, because the way the employment agreement was crafted, from my perspective, it said you should do quarterly evaluations during the first year. Yeah. That's done. And so if you want to use, if you want to continue to do quarterly evaluations, I would significantly simplify it and basically just have 1 feedback item as opposed to all 7 factors.
Right, okay. And I guess on that too, I would want to hear from Jameson how he feels about being, do you want quarterly assessments or what would your preference be? So hard to be just asking.
Now's your moment.
Yeah. Annual's fine. I mean.
Let me help. Having been a CEO for a very large organization, there's a lot of day-to-day issues that just require irons in the fire, and going through a structured evaluation process is just taking the time away from the business of the district. And that you have the opportunity to provide feedback, and you should be providing feedback. If you see that things are kind of going off the rails, then you just need to say something. But I think a structured evaluation process, probably annual, is adequate.
Go ahead.
Does the employment agreement directly correlate compensation to the review?
Yeah.
It does?
Yeah, there's a very explicit provision that, and I tried to quote it, but basically that it says that compensation adjustment will be based on performance, particularly as related to the the goals that are identified in the strategic business plan.
Okay.
Doesn't say it quite that way,
Okay.
but that's what it gets down to.
Okay, and it's not necessarily absolutely true of all LTD employees that their performance review is correlated to compensation.
I'd be surprised if it was. I don't think that's the case, but I didn't look at other employees.
Yeah, okay, well, certainly not the union, but I'm just saying, I mean, it's interesting. I agree that it should be the same kind of criteria, but it's a completely different ballgame.
And that's why this is a different form than other employees.
Yeah, and then my other question is, is there opportunity, or should there be opportunity for the review or for there to be feedback from employees versus just the board, or is it only the board that does the review?
So different organizations have approached this very good question different ways. When I was a CEO, one of my evaluation criteria was, quote, feedback from the board or feedback from employees. How do the employees feel in terms of how I'm doing as CEO? The board never took the time to talk to employees. They didn't know exactly what, they felt, and they basically just ignored that evaluation criteria in spite of the fact that they had it in the criteria list. In your case, I think you have some really useful information that you can already use, both from the evaluation that you heard today, but also one of the factors in the strategic business plan is the sort of support by employees, at least as I interpret it. And so I would think you would want to look at all of those factors, consider that as input in your decision, and then use that and apply it to the criteria that basically says effectiveness in management and leadership of the district staff. Put it into that bucket.
Thank you.
Other comments?
Are there suggested changes, things you would like to do differently, changes in wording?
Not something I'd like to do differently, but we mentioned personal performance goals, and we had an informal discussion with you. That was I think we only did one quarterly conversation. I remember in that conversation, you laid out a vision and a plan for what you were going to do. And I was wondering if it would be appropriate to include some of the vision and where you're headed as personal performance goals to look at in this evaluation process.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
When was that conversation?
When did
Pretty
we do
early
that?
on in the.
Was that
You may have been here.
May? April,
Yeah.
Do you remember?
May? When we did the evaluation, it was May-ish. Yeah.
My only caution, and again, I also put it in the definition of the criteria, it's progress in achieving the individual performance goals. Those goals should be aspirational goals. They should be stretch goals, right? And again, I will tell you, having been in this position, it's not fair to really hammer somebody because things got super busy and I didn't make progress or complete every single one of those goals if they were really, in fact, stretch goals and aspirational goals. But you should be able to see progress in achieving those goals. And you had that conversation a couple of months ago. You're going to do an evaluation for the next couple of months. I think it's probably fair. Just consider the fact that you shouldn't be looking for 100% completion on all those goals.
No, because this was a long-term vision conversation, and I would be just, looking for an update of where we are.
No, I think that's spot on. And, part of what I want to get to a retreat is to talk about those kinds of goals, where the organization needs to go. So, if the board's in agreement and alignment with that vision, and certainly I think that would be a good baseline or a good base for those goals to be set.
Yeah.
There are aspirations in there.
And given that, it would be helpful if you, Jameson, in your self-evaluation could kind of reflect on that for that particular criteria.
Absolutely.
Michelle?
Yes, one more question. When it comes to Jameson's self-evaluation, is there a standard format that he's going to be utilizing a form, or is that just kind of whatever Jameson decides he wants to use as that format to communicate with us?
When I've done this before, I've always suggested, well, try to use the form, right? So people can see it and relate. And inevitably what happens is there's a lot more information that you will get in the self-evaluation that doesn't fit on the form. And so my advice, my counsel to Jameson would be just break it up and structure it in a way that's consistent with what you have here, but it may not be exactly the same beautiful color-coded structure that we've got here.
That's fine.
Just so that it follows the same structure.
Seen many variations in my day too. So just to kind of try to keep some consistency in the thought process and the, navigating.
Use the same criteria, use the same rating score, but it may look somewhat different than this nice cleaned up form.
Any other questions or comments? Lawrence?
Yeah, in regards to like the rating scale, like I guess in your opinion, just because I don't see one and it's mirroring like the one LTD already has, like, do you find like maybe there is some sort of benefit to not having like a middle ground option, like just average, I guess? Is it like muddy the waters a little bit?
I will tell you that the HR professionals that I deal with, they're like all over on this thing. There's a whole different range of opinions, and they're all valid professional opinions in terms of the right way to do it. And it becomes a matter of personal preference. I will tell you, my personal preference is to have an odd number of factors so that there is a middle ground. But that said, again, I think these as defined that are used for the rest of the staff are more than adequate. And, it's going to be subject to your interpretation and your evaluation in terms of how you apply them.
Okay, so an important discussion. You had some steps for us, and what I'd like to do is just go through the decisions you wanted us to make tonight, and just to make sure one by one, make sure everybody's okay, or if anybody has changes. And I'll start with process and schedule. Are we okay with the process and schedule? You don't need a vote, just, we're okay? Okay, evaluation period, 11/7/22 to 10/31/23. Okay there? Everybody's okay? Evaluation criteria, those are very important. That's in the handout. We're okay? You can vote too if you like. Rating scale? Everybody okay with the rating scale? And the evaluation form? You're not? Okay.
My good friend at the City of Eugene included a Spotify playlist as part of her year in review, and I fear I won't be able to express my artistic side. So just getting that on the record, I will go with the form.
Good.
So given that, I mean, you're not going to make decisions in executive session or in a work session, I assume, but would you be willing to consider making this a consent agenda item next month, in which case I really don't need to come down for the conversation, if that works for you? And if you want me here, I'll be here.
I think that works for us. Unless something pops up, I'll let you know. I do think we may need some help when we get to that step in the process where we are determining what the appropriate salary is based on the evaluation.
And that's fine. I'll have saved a little time for that, and we can make that happen.
Yes.
Okay.
And at that time, when we're doing that, you'll be able to answer our questions that we have about what we're comparing, or I'm assuming you'll have surveys and other types of, comparable salaries and bonus structures for.
So we weren't, I have not been planning to do that because, again, I mean, I assumed the compensation piece was up to you. I can share with you the criteria that are defined in the employment agreement in terms of how that was envisioned in terms of reaching a decision on compensation. But in terms of like a a survey of comparables. I wasn't prepared to do that.
I think what might be needed based on that question and everybody else's looks is some time set aside to review what's in the contract.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then decide, what we do with what's in the contract and whether or not we want to do some of the things that you mentioned, Kelly, and perhaps others. But I think we're a fairly new board and we're on new territory in terms of evaluating the CEO and using the contract we currently have.
To tag on to Kelly, I think if we are going to do, it's because we weren't here, or most of us weren't here when your salary was determined, I do think I would like some comparable, even if it's broad brushstroke, comparable information to know that we're in the ballpark, or maybe something that tells me that that was done when your salary was offered. And that's going to take some time. And if it's not your time, that's fine. But do we have some capacity somewhere?
My memory is that was done by a different consulting firm.
Okay, great. I just,
So I'd be happy to work with staff and sort of pull that together so that we can share what was done at that time.
Perfect.
And then we can also examine the criteria as identified in the employment agreement, give you enough information to hopefully be able to make a decision based on that.
That sounds great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
So definitely a future discussion somewhere in those steps.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay.
Anything else?
Great. Thank you
Mark?
very much.
Thank you.
So we can adjourn the work session if there's nothing else. Okay, the work session is adjourned. Can we move right into the regular session or do we want to take a break? Let's take a 5-minute recess. August 16th meeting of the Lane Transit District Board of Directors. We'll start with the roll call. Susan Cox, Pete Knox. Here. Kelly Sutherland.
Here.
Lawrence Green.
Here.
Michelle Weber.
Here.
And Heather Murphy.
Here.
Thank you. Any announcements or additions to the agenda? Do you have any additional comments for tonight? Great. Okay, we'll start right off with the employee of the month. We have two this evening, one for July and one for August. Bonnie's going to present the July employee of the month. Welcome.
Hi, my name is Bonnie Willard. I'm an operations field supervisor. Thank you, board. Thank you everybody for being here tonight. And thank you for allowing me the opportunity. Matt Russell, he's been with LTD for 16 years of service. He's had 15 consecutive years of safe driving. While he's out there, he's been nominated for Employee of the Month 4 times in his career. He's had multiple compliments, not just from our passengers, but also from employees and supervisors. He's polite, courteous, helpful, calm, and always calm under stressful situations, and it's been recognized multiple times. He's been an operator, and I acknowledged him one time for witnessing an elderly lady at the Eugene station falling. He was supposed to ride that operator back to the shop, but instead he stepped off and assisted that person to make sure they were okay. He always goes above and beyond every day, and for that, he's meeting our values, mission, vision, values. He's a great guy. He's a family guy. He loves fishing. Does he love fishing? And I also want to thank his wife, Tiffany, for all the support she gives him, especially on those days can be challenging at times. So, yeah, congratulations. Thank you.
Great. Okay, great. Try not to. Token of our appreciation, and we wear proudly. You match. And a letter and a certificate. We're just loading you up here.
That's fantastic.
Thank you very
guys.
much.
I appreciate it.
And everything you do for the community and the customers. Do you have anything you'd like to say to the board?
I really don't, but thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity. I've been here 16 years. It's been an adventure, up and down the road. So I've seen more. I've lived in this community all my life, and it was not until I worked at LTD that I'd actually driven around the city of Eugene. It really, when I started here, I actually, I always drove around outside, drove in to where I wanted to go, but I'd never drove. I couldn't tell you where I was going, I couldn't give directions, but now I can. And I appreciate the opportunity to come to work here. It's been a good 16 years. Look forward to maybe 9, 15 more. We'll see. Thank you.
Set, you're going to do the next presentation.
Thank you, Chair. Board members, it is my distinct honor to introduce to you Javier Rodriguez, who is our August 2023 Employee of the Month. Javier started his service with Lane Transit District as a bus operator in 2021. In 2001. Yeah, that makes sense. In 2002, he was our February Employee of the Month. And then in 2012, he was also our February Employee of the Month. And then he was named our 2012 Employee of the Year. I think I got all that right. In 2013, Javier was promoted to Operations Supervisor, where he's been ever since. And Javier was nominated because he went to the assistance of a fellow employee who was involved in an altercation with a woman at Springfield Station. Javier exudes customer service and class. So I'm sure that Javier provided assistance with that same customer service orientation and class. He was able to help subdue the woman until the police were able to arrive. So that's why Javier was nominated. But Javier has a long career of providing exemplary customer service.
Javier is loved and adored by our operators and our operations. He's very solutions oriented. He's very positive. And most of all, he has an amazing amount of integrity. So Javier has been able to build a very good relationship and good trust with the bus operators who he works with. So it's my honor to introduce Javier.
Congratulations. As I hear these stories, and I've heard, several of them, employees of the month, it just reminds me that what you folks do out in the field is much more than just moving people from A to B. Right. There's a lot of things that go on in the middle that makes a difference for the people who ride the bus. So thank you very much. We have a few things for you. Thank you. The appreciation of our appreciation. And Tim, I hope you wear proudly a plaque for you to go with all your others. I hope you got a poster on the last ones too. Oh yeah, a letter of appreciation. Thank you. And a great poster.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks again. Do you have anything you'd like to say?
Yeah, I just want to say thank you to LTD for 22 years of employment, and I feel like this is just not mine. This is for everybody that works in operations and maintenance everywhere. So I work with a great team, and they've been helping me since I started. She helped me a lot. Josh helped me. Everybody, Lonnie helped me. Everybody has helped me. So I feel like this is just not mine. This is for everybody. So thank you very much.
Very nice. Next, we have board member reports. Any reports from board members? Pete, you must have something. Go ahead, Pete.
Thanks, Gino. So pretty much everybody in this room knows I was in Birmingham, Alabama a few weeks ago and I went with our two staff people sitting over there, Allie and Brianna. Their track was a little bit different than mine because of this was specific to board members and board administrators conference. I'm not going to get into too much detail tonight about it, but there's two big takeaways I want everybody in this room to hear, and that is, number one, that we all look at our challenges, and I believe me when I tell you, the challenges we face are similar to challenges facing other transit districts all over the country. But I will say also that this organization, I admit a little bit biased, but we got a heck of a crew here. Everybody from the very top all the way down to the newest operator. I tell you, this organization is ahead of the curve. We are dealing with those challenges in ways that I think are different than anybody else is really doing. So keep up the good work, all of you. And I was absolutely pleased to represent LTD.
Thank you, Pete. I appreciate the effort and the time you take to represent LTD at these other venues and the information you bring back to us. Thank you.
Thanks.
Heather.
So I had the pleasure of attending the Lane Act meeting last week in Florence. It was the first time we had been together, in person. Usually those meetings are online, and we started to discuss priorities for around the county. And so thanks to Jameson and crew for getting our priority in, which Mr. Zakos shared before. And it's really ours is a policy level, and I'll let you speak more to it, but it was wonderful to hear from Florence. Congratulations on all of their projects. and it was nice to attend. And then Michelle and I had the pleasure of being at the staff barbecue. So I encourage the board in the future, if you have a chance to go, it had been 3 years, I think. And our employee of the year is in the room. It was nice to watch her have an award and just to sit with some of you and chat, those that I had not met. It was lovely. So thank you. That's all I have.
Any other reports? Great, thank you. Audience participation. I have nobody signed up in the room. Do we have anybody online who would like to comment?
No.
Thank you. Next is the consent calendar. We need to take one item off of the consent calendar. And I'll go ahead and make that motion. I move to remove the contract number 2023-02 bus engine and hybrid parts, Gillig LLC, Cummins Incorporated, PAC Power Group, I assume. So I'll make that motion. Is there a second? Thank you, Heather. Was Heather seconded? So we'll do that after we approve the consent calendar. Motion for the consent calendar? And that motion should be as amended. So resolution number, blah, 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 as amended.
I move adoption of LTD resolution number 2023-08-16-033. It is hereby resolved that the consent calendar for August 16th, 2023 is approved as amended.
Thank you, Michelle.
Second.
Seconded by Heather. We do a roll call vote. Kelly?
Yes.
Michelle?
Yes.
Heather?
Aye.
Lawrence?
Yes.
Pete?
Aye.
And I also vote aye. That's passed. Now we'll move on to the item that we pulled. That's the contract for the bus engine hybrid parts. And do we have a staff presentation?
Come up there, let's come up together. Yeah, there's no presentation. Eric and I can come. Thank you so much, board, for having us here tonight. Thank you for pulling this agenda item. There was a couple of corrections that we did make to this agenda item. And so we wanted to make sure we had the most transparent information before you. So we did have a typo that was on the AIS that stated it was for $12,290,000. It should have been $12,920,000. So a little bit of a difference there. So we got that addressed. And then also we didn't feel like we were clearly reporting the transcription of the pricing that we had. It was a little confusing. And so you had to do, the math added up, but you had to be a little thoughtful in how you came to those numbers. And so we just cleared that up so that the prices you see on that tabulation are actually the prices of the 5-year per vendor down the line. So it should help just clarify that and make it a little more transparent.
Great catch. Any questions? Ready for a motion?
Is it the same resolution number?
The contract number.
Because it was part of the consent calendar, which we removed it, so.
Camille, how would you like us to do that?
So on the AIS, there is a separate resolution number.
The revised AIS.
Okay. That's the hybrid bus, sorry. Okay, I can make motion, is this?
I think it's just this one.
I move
Adoption
adoption
of LTD.
of LTD resolution number 2023-08-16-034. Oh, no, it's because it's going to be 034 was the first one. So is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. It is hereby resolved that LTD Board of Directors acting as the LTD Contract Review Board approves contract number 2023-02 Cummins as presented, amended?
Presented.
Is that it?
Presented. Is there a second?
Second?
As amended.
Yeah, as amended.
Seconded by Michelle. We'll do a roll call vote. Pete?
Aye.
Lawrence?
Yes.
Heather?
Aye.
Michelle?
Yes.
Kelly?
Yes.
And I vote yes. It's unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you.
Easy.
We got there. Next item on the agenda is several district policies regarding surplus vehicles, charter services, and sponsorships. And Camille is going to make that presentation.
Good evening, Board Chair and members of the board. I am coming before you today with 3 policies that staff have developed with a request for adoption. I'm going to provide a brief summary of each policy, and staff are present and available for any specific questions that any of you may have. The first policy is a surplus vehicles policy. This policy provides guidelines for the district to exchange the use of surplus vehicles for in-kind services with other local community agents, nonprofits, and government agencies. For example, the recent in-kind service exchange of a IMGO vehicle with the IMS baseball team in exchange for marketing opportunities. The next policy is a charter services policy. This policy states the parameters in which LTD is able to provide charter services in compliance with federal regulations. And this really stemmed from the recent request that we had to provide services for the Oregon Country Fair and other ongoing requests over the years, such as football service. We have federal FTA regulations that we have to abide by and that set the parameters on when we can and cannot provide charter services. So we just lined out a policy compiling all of those regulations into one document, so it's clearly stated for the district and the community. And lastly is a sponsorship policy. This policy provides the district with guidelines around entering into sponsorship agreements in which the district provides funds or in-kind services with local nonprofits, community events, and defines the difference between sponsorships with local nonprofits and community events versus businesses and civic events such as chambers or Lane Council of Governments, our state community stakeholders, instances such as that. And if you have any specific questions, like I said, we do have staff available to answer questions.
Any questions or comments? I have a couple, more towards the charter services and the sponsorships. I get the general impression that the charter services is more writing down what we currently do. Is that correct? Or are there some changes? And the same thing with the sponsorships. Are we just documenting what we've done in the past, or are we actually making some changes?
So the charter services, there have always been federal regulations that we have had to adhere to. We just are making it simple by putting them all in one policy document, so they're clear and equitable across to the community and to staff as to what we are and are not allowed to do. Does that answer that question?
That does.
Okay. And for sponsorships, we have not previously had a policy in place for sponsorships. And so we, with some recent requests that we have received, we determined that it will create a more equitable process internally and externally if we define some parameters and guidelines surrounding how we do and do not provide sponsorships.
Are there any examples of sponsorships that we've done in the past on a regular basis that will go away under this policy?
I think Pat might be able to answer that.
Yeah, there's a couple of things. What we've tried to do what we've looked at with the sponsorship policy is instead of providing money, money that should go for transit, is to try to swap out cash for tickets and access to the bus. So for instance, we were not able this year to sponsor the fireworks in Springfield this year. That was one example of some things that we didn't do because we weren't able to reach an agreement on the sort of the price of the tickets and how they would distribute those tickets to their vendors and other people. The other thing is we have a number of people that like to ask us for buses to do wine tours and other things. So there's a number of nonprofits that we probably won't be able to satisfy that request due to a whole variety of reasons, including the fact we don't have enough bus operators to be able to pull that off. But the point was to have something in place that we could make decisions on to go forward. But we'd like to fund them all. They're all good requests, but we also have to be realistic with the resources and the resources for what they're intended to do. So.
Other questions or comments? Pete?
Yeah, I'm not sure if you covered this, but I was a little confused in reading this. Wasn't sure what the policy refers to a federal vehicle. Is that a vehicle that's bought by federal funds?
Yes, yes, it is.
Yeah,
okay, as opposed to one that we just buy with our own, out of just general fund money, correct?
Correct.
So there are different rules for disposition of federal funds, vehicles bought with federal funds versus non-federal funds. So this would apply to the vehicles purchased with non-federal funds.
Yeah, of course it would be. Thank you.
One question. So the charter service policy.
I understand it's a consolidation of a lot of different policies kind of in one document for the purposes of clarity. But is this a change in practice? Did we have a change in?
It is. So it's a combination. The charter rules have existed, so we put those down on paper as well. But then we also put some other stipulations around it that makes sense to us as an organization. One, we don't want to reduce service, regular general service to provide charter service. We don't want to call in our operators on their days off to provide this kind of service. We need to recover the actual cost of providing the service as well. So with the Oregon Country Fair, we charged them the actual cost of the service, which was considerably higher than what we charged them in the past. We added those stipulations around it.
Thank you.
Brian?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that the firm has provided input on these policies to look at federal regulations and make sure we're capturing all of those responsibilities, and we're legally backing this proposal.
Thank you, Brian. Well, thank you for your work. I think it brings some great predictability and accountability to three important areas and should help in the future.
Thank you. We had a great team of staff contributing to writing these policies.
And do you want us to approve this, or is just?
Yes, please.
Okay. There's a motion.
Motion for adoption.
Got it.
Okay.
I move adoption of LTD resolution number 2023-08-16-039. It is hereby resolved that the LTD Board of Directors adopts the surplus vehicles, charter services, and sponsorships policies as presented.
Thank you, Michelle. Seconded by Heather. The roll call. Kelly?
Yes.
Yes.
Michelle?
Yes.
Heather?
Aye.
Lawrence?
Yes.
Pete?
Aye.
And I also vote yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have a contract with an accounting firm. Is it Edie Bailey? Is that how you say that name? Yeah. Did I say the name right of the firm? What's that?
Eide Bailey.
Eide Bailey. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Pam.
So tonight, we are asking for approval of a contract to engage Eide Bailey as our auditors for our annual comprehensive financial report and pension plan audits. We had originally planned to continue with Moss Adams for another year under a cooperative agreement and then go out to bid, a general bid. And we had previously asked the board for approval to use that cooperative agreement, and it was sponsored by Deschutes County. However, after further review, we found that that contract did not have the required language to allow us to use that contract as a cooperative agreement. We did go back to Moss Adams. We asked them if they had any other agreements that contained the required language currently in place, and they said they did not. So then we conducted a search to see if there were other cooperative agreements that we would be able to use for our audit services. And we found that the TriMet contract was written as a cooperative agreement. We have thoroughly reviewed that agreement. Our procurement staff have spent many hours making sure that it contains all the required language that it needs to have. In addition, the pricing of this contract is about 2% less. So it's not a lot of money less, but it is a little bit less than the Moss Adams contract. So we are asking for approval to go with the Eide Bailey contract for our audit services. Do you have any questions about that?
Questions? I have one. Did you normally, when you're selecting an auditor, there's an interview process and you evaluate the firm and the people who may be participating in the audit? Did that occur?
What we did is we talked to TriMet about their services. They're in the second year of the contract, and they are continuing to retain them. So we felt like that was an endorsement of their services. And then we also did check into the credentials of the firm, including whether they had an Oregon municipal license and the different things that are required by Oregon, which they do have that. They also happen to they have a branch that specializes in government contracts, including other transit agencies. So that also gave us confidence that they would be able to do the audit for us.
And did they identify the people who would be assigned to do the audit? Mm-hmm. Okay, great.
Yeah. So we had the partner's name is Ahmed Garaba. And he's actually located in Menlo Park, California, out of that office, but he happens to be the partner who is in charge of all of the government audits. And so he'll be the partner in charge. And then we also have talked with Joe Escobar, who will be also working on our audit. So we've actually had a couple of Zoom sessions with them and made sure that their timeline, that was my main concern when we realized that we wouldn't be able to use Moss Adams, was whether we would be able to fit into their schedule this fall. And they assured us that they would be able to meet our timelines.
Great. I think changing auditors can be painful, but it's a good thing because you get a fresh look at the books. And, they'll give us some new insights, I'm sure.
Thanks.
Other comments or questions? Okay, entertain a motion.
Mr. President, I move adoption of LTD resolution number 2023-08-16-040.
Thank you, Heather. Is there a second?
Oh, am I supposed to read this?
Probably.
Oh, you want me to? Okay. It is hereby resolved that the LTD Board of Directors, acting as the LTD Contract Review Board, approves contract number 2023-16 as presented.
Second.
Seconded by Michelle. We'll do a roll call. Pete?
Aye.
Lawrence?
Yes.
Heather?
Aye.
Michelle?
Yes.
Kelly?
Yes.
And I also vote yes. Pam?
Thank you.
See what happens when you give us a month.
Yeah. Okay. Good luck.
Gotta go.
Any next item is written reports. Staff is happy to respond. If you have any questions, as usual, there is a wealth of information in there. Pete has a question.
more of a comment, actually. I just wanted to make a brief comment about the fact that you guys have been kind of simplifying and changing the reports, and I actually really appreciate that. Those of you who've gotten to know me know that I am someone who likes to learn as much as possible, but to be an effective board member, there are things I absolutely need to know. And there's a lot of things I don't necessarily need to know. And I'll give you a great example. The security report up until recently had this whole matrix of all the violations and stuff, but it's been simplified. And it's like, how many ordinance 36 violations do we have? And it's very specific. Boom. That's what I need to know to be good at being a board member. So I just want to tell you guys that I appreciate the consolidating things, and sometimes less really is more.
Great, thank you. Anybody else? Okay. Any items that the board would like for a future meeting? Do you have something?
I do.
Great.
Sorry.
No, don't.
So just wanted to call out just a couple of things in the operations report. Ridership on MX year over day is up about 20%, and on fixed route is up 19%. We're still chasing pre-pandemic numbers, but we are moving in the right direction. I've noticed on the buses I ride, there are many others along with me. Wanted to call out the planning area. The planning area does a lot of work behind the scenes and under the water, but they are really moving forward on the communications outreach and community outreach and communications assessment project. I believe we got a final draft of the list of the steering committee before this meeting started, so we'll be reviewing that. And also the work on the comprehensive analysis and the ride source analysis will begin. So I just wanted to give a shout out to Tom and his team for doing all that work behind the scenes. The marketing group continues to push forward, working in conjunction with HR and operations to work on staffing operators. You know, we went back and we're looking at, we've revised our strategic business plan, which you'll hear in an upcoming meeting, and we put a goal to increase service, which means that we have to have a recruiting goal, which is what's hurt us over the past several months. So I wanted to point that out as well. We had a, what was it? The Four Corners event. I want to say Rock the Block, but I know that's not the name. The reading and Read Rock the, right. I'm just going to call it Rock the Block. I was right the first time. We had the Rock the Block event, August 4, and down in downtown, LTD was on one corner, LCC was on another corner, the library, and then we staffed the other corner. I think the city did do something there. And it was a positive experience. A lot of kids, face painting, book reading, just a positive environment down in that part of the city for that evening. We did get a very nice email from a person who happened to walk by and kind of like the energy that was there. That was followed up by an event last Friday where we had an individual playing guitar. So just trying to create some more positive energy down around our Eugene station, and we look forward to continuing that. We are in talks with a company, with a nonprofit called Reveille. Kelly met Steve, their executive director today. Reveille focuses on veterans, second chance program, and also indigenous peoples, and looks to be a conduit to them for services. So whether it's going to the VA or finding a job or finding housing, they look to help those people find those services, tie those together. By the time they're done with that program, they have some money in the bank, and they have some life skills, and go on out of that program. How we're looking to work with them is we get a lot of different challenges on our service. A lot of different needs are out there. And so they are trained social workers. A lot of the clients that they work with, we have dual relationships with. So we have some extra space down at Eugene Station. We're looking at housing them out of there to assist our public safety officers when there is an issue and someone needs a different kind of help that we're not fully trained to provide. They can provide that and coordinate those efforts. We're also going to be looking to work with them for some of the training with our ambassador program, which is doing well. That had a soft launch, and we've had about 2,300, just over 2,300 contacts. We have about 14 people participating in that program. We're going to be using some interns out of LCC, but we're also going to, or students rather, LCC, but we're also using some of our operators that are on light duty, helping to get them back to work in some capacity. And we're hearing positive stories from our ambassadors, but we're also hearing from our operators that say, you know what, when the ambassador is on board, it's one last thing for me to focus on. I can focus on the driving. So that's going well. I know John Allen will be here at a future meeting to give a more thorough update on where that is along with our safety program. But I did want to pull those out of the report for you.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Anything else for the good of the order? Seeing nothing, we're adjourned. Have a great evening.